Good morning, and thank you for joining Evotech for our annual Security Summit. The importance of cybersecurity continues to compound, and the challenges for us as a community continue to multiply. We are firm believers that through community, collaboration, and disruptive thinking, we are best placed to address the ever-pervasive threat. My name is Daniel Danieli, and I've recently joined Evotech as the VP of Business Development to further our partnerships and our alliances and work with my colleagues to develop new capabilities to better serve our customers. In the short time that I've been at Evotech, what has struck me is the collaboration we have had with our customers who leverage Evotech's go-to-market differentiation. Our customer journey typically starts with our executive advisors, being engaged to help align business priorities to strategy roadmaps. These are practitioners, much like you, who have had CISO experience in some of the largest, most complex organizations such as Sony, Sports Authority, the Federal Reserve, and the National Guard, to name a few. These engagements then leverage our architecture capabilities to ensure the appropriate blueprints are mapped out for high quality and high fidelity solutions. Our customers then leverage strategic sourcing to help with tool rationalization, benchmarking, and selection that also considers the right route to procure, be it traditional CapEx or some sort of consumption model, or leveraging some of those marketplace credits that better align to the budgets that you've got. And finally, our high-value engineering ensures that the technologies that you invest in are appropriately integrated into your environments to ensure the business outcomes we partner with you on are actually achieved. We have a jam-packed agenda for you today, and before I get into introducing our guest speaker, I want to take the opportunity to thank our partners and sponsors for today's summit. Thank you, Attack IQ, Red Canary, Salt Security, and Sunrise Security. Without your sponsorship, events like this wouldn't be possible. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Alissa Knight, the Princess of Thieves. Alissa is a business magnate, American author, screenwriter, film producer, and director. Prior to her career as a film director and producer, Alissa was a reformed black hat hacker who was arrested at 17 and later went on to work with the US intelligence community in cyber warfare. She became a media personality synonymous with car and API hacking when she hacked 55 banks in less than a week and demonstrated the ability to take remote control of law enforcement vehicles. Alissa, we are so excited to have you here today to kick off the Evotech Security Summit and learn how you rob banks and cryptocurrency exchanges through APIs. Alissa, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. For those of you who have missed my presentation, Princess of Thieves, in the past, this is an awesome opportunity for you to see that presentation. And also, if you've seen it in the past, I've added new screenshots and new information into this presentation that wasn't previously seen. So thank you so much, and we'll go ahead and get started. This is my favorite quote. If I were to advise a hostile nation state on how to take down the United States, especially its financial infrastructure, I'd tell them to start with the APIs first. And that's because so much of our critical infrastructure, whether it's healthcare, financial services, transportation, the plumbing of our lives today are APIs. And for those of you who are driving around in a Honda or a Nissan, and you think you're impervious to being attacked because you're not driving around in something like a Tesla, you couldn't be more wrong. Every car made after 2001 is communicating with APIs. So you're driving around in a connected car, whether you may know it or not. Just a quick background on myself. As Dan mentioned, I'm a recovering hacker of 23 years. I was arrested in '97 for hacking into a government network, went to go work for the intelligence community. I do run a family of companies with my wife under Knight Group, which is Knight Inc., Knight Studios, which is a film production company, Knight Publishing, and even roasting coffee beans, which will be shipping here shortly in Q1 at Knight Coffee Co. I am the writer, director, and producer for multiple TV series. And prior to getting into film production, as Dan mentioned, I've been branded as an API hacker, hacking healthcare APIs, giving me access to millions of patient records, hacking financial or fintech companies. And I am also a serial entrepreneur, having started and sold multiple companies. I'm now on my third exit and currently building a venture capital fund to also do M&A work. And I've also published a book on hacking connected cars. So for those of you who are interested in learning how to hack connected cars, I've published a book on that. It's available on Amazon. You can go pick it up today. And I'm in the process of writing a new book on hacking APIs. So a little bit about this research. Other than the cool title, it is about, just as you may have guessed, hacking banks, specifically also not just banks and like your typical brick and mortar banks, but cryptocurrency exchanges as well as neobanks. You'll hear me refer to the term of neobank throughout my presentation. Neobanks are basically a new kind of bank that has no walls, no brick and mortar. They deliver their services to consumers purely online. So I'm sure many of you know a lot of neobanks out there. So, I went and basically downloaded the top 10 apps from each individual sector, whether it's a neobank, a traditional bank, and even cryptocurrency exchanges. And this is a result of all of that research and hard work. So just some key takeaways from that research. In many of the mobile apps that I downloaded, there were hard-coded working production passwords, API keys and tokens, and there were a total of 49 found in the research thus far. The total account holders affected were 123 million account holders. So for those of you who are like, oh, Alissa, this isn't that big of a deal, you probably targeted small little mom and pop shops, small community banks, small credit unions. The actual size of the organizations varied, and I did make sure to go after the small cryptocurrency exchanges or banks all the way up to the large multinational corporations. Total assets under management was $269 billion. Most common vulnerability found was API 1 2019. You will hear me refer to the OWASP API Security Top 10. As many of you may know, I've recently been added as a contributor to the OWASP project. And so if you hear me refer to these API 1, API 2, API 3, those are from that top 10 list. And they basically describe the top 10 vulnerabilities affecting APIs. A lot of the apps that I looked at communicating with mobile APIs were vulnerable to WIDM attacks, or what I like to call WIDM attacks, or women in the middle attacks. And so the total number of apps that I found were vulnerable were 10, meaning that they didn't implement any kind of certificate pinning in the mobile app, allowing me to insert myself in that communication that's going on between the mobile app and the backend API. Okay, so what exactly is an API? For those of you who don't know what that is, I get that this isn't just an API event, so I'll quickly explain what APIs are. I want you to think of APIs as kind of like the waiter at a restaurant. So if we were to go into a restaurant and sit down and order, think of the menu as sort of the data that we're requesting as the API consumer, right? So we give our order to the waiter is the API, and then the waiter takes our request for food and drinks into the back kitchen where the cooks prepare our requested meal, and then the waiter brings it back out to us. This is a great example of what an API is. The API doesn't care about what the consumer is. It could be a web app, it could be a mobile app, it could be a car, right? So even cars communicate with APIs. It really can be anything. And so that API, no matter what that consumer requester is going to deliver exactly what's being requested. Now, some of you may hear me refer to the concept of a broken object level authorization attack, or BOLA attack. I love to teach with analogies. So for those of you who don't really fully understand what BOLA means, think of it kind of like a valet, right? So let's pick on Dan for a minute, all right? Dan drives up to a restaurant in this expensive Lamborghini, because Evotech just pays him so well. He's got himself a Lamborghini, and I pull up in a Hyundai, and I want to steal his Lamborghini. So I noticed that the valet gives him a ticket with the number 18. Okay, so I pull up behind Dan in my Hyundai, And then I noticed that the valet gives me the number 17. So I go back, I disappear for about 30 minutes. I take a Sharpie and I change out 7 to an 8. And I come back to the valet and give him my ticket. And then he brings me ticket number 18 that belongs to that car. And then I drive away with Dan's Lamborghini. This is a great analogy for what BOLA is. I'm authenticated. I have the ticket. I'm allowed to be there, right? I'm clearly have checked in a car, and the only problem is the valet thinks that I'm the driver for number 18, and I drive away in the Lambo. So with a BOLA attack, you're actually given a token, right? An OAuth token. You're allowed to be there, but the problem is that even though you have a token, you're requesting data that doesn't belong to you. That is a BOLA attack. You're going outside the bounds of your logged in user to request data like patient records, or in the case of my law enforcement vehicle hack, for example, remotely starting and stopping an engine or locking and unlocking the doors. Even though I'm authenticated, I'm not authorized to be able to request that data or perform those actions. Okay, so I'm going to give you some demographics from the target victim banks or financial services companies. So these are the number of employees for the different apps and the targets. For the organizations that were headquartered in the United States, there were 19 for the community banks and for the brick and mortar banks. Assets under management. This is the amount of money and size of the organizations, the financial services companies, as well as the number of account holders. So some of them didn't disclose how many account holders they had, but some did. Actually, I just noticed that this is probably blocking your guys' view. So let me close that. And so that's the number of account holders. So from 1 to 500,000 all the way up to over 100 million account holders. So you can see that the number of banks that I was targeting were across all different demographics, including the cryptocurrency exchanges. So I did actually target international financial services companies. So for those of you who are asking a question, hey, look, did you only go after US financial services and fintech companies? I did not. I went international as well. So 3 of the cryptocurrency exchanges were based in Asia, some and based in other UK and the United States. Not assets under management, but crypto under management was between different amounts. So 1 million to 1 billion, 1.1 billion to 10 billion, and then 50 billion up. So the size of the cryptocurrency exchanges were also all over the place. And then also the number of employees. So very small cryptocurrency fintech companies all the way up to over 500 employees as well. For the neobanks, these were also international. So I targeted neobanks all over the world, so including the United Kingdom and even Canada, the number of employees, the assets under management, and then the account holders. And so let's go ahead and get right into the data. So you have a good understanding now of the size of the organizations. So for those of you who are like, hey, you probably only targeted small companies that didn't have the budget for cybersecurity, or the size of the number of employees to be able to properly secure their code or harden their code, they were really all over the place. Okay, so quick disclaimer. A lot of these screenshots are redacted to protect the privacy and security of the targets. If you take really close attention, you'll see things in here like usernames and passwords. You'll see Firebase credentials. You'll see tokens and keys. So I even found hard-coded tokens in there with no expiration date, and different API keys as well, so private and public. So for those of you who are interested in being an API hacker and want to understand what was the actual tool stack that I used in my research, I can tell you that I used Ubuntu. For those of you who use Kali, there's no offense. I've used Kali. Kali is a great distro, really, even Parrot OS. A lot of those hacker distros are great, and they'll immediately get you up and running quickly. But I like to build my own system from the ground up because I want to know what libraries are installed, what versions. I want to be able to build that system myself. The most common tool that I use is Burp Suite. Now, for those of you who don't have the money to purchase the Pro version, there's a free community edition. You can use it. I've used it. I just bought it because I wanted to support PortSwigger. So yeah, so you don't have to purchase the commercial version of Burp Suite. I do work off of a Mac as well, and then for specific APIs that I'm hacking, I will actually sometimes use Postman. So I'll combine Midem Proxy, which basically is a person in the middle attack tool that allows you to inject yourself in communication between two endpoints. So you basically present a certificate to both ends, and both ends think they're talking to the other when in fact they're talking to you. Now, for those of you who don't know what Kite Runner is is what's called a fuzzer. It allows you to fuzz APIs and just basically mutate different fields within those requests in order to find vulnerabilities. There's another fuzzing tool that's freely available and downloadable is FFUF. For those of you who have not seen it yet, there's a really great mind map from a gentleman named David Sopas. And that mind map has a list of all of the API hacking tools out there, as well as fuzzers. So for those of you who want to get more into this, you can take a look at that. Okay, so what is a woman in the middle attack tool? Again, this is a quick illustration of where I was in the communication. I downloaded the cryptocurrency, neobank, or regular banking mobile app. And then I injected myself in between that communication as it communicated with the API. Now, some of you are probably wondering, Alissa, I don't understand. Why did you do a Widem attack? What's the point? The point is that it allows me to learn how the API works. I want all of you to throw out your definition of what hacking is and really just very simply understand that hacking is nothing more than sending stimulus to an application that the developer didn't expect to receive. That is all hacking is to me. And so if you think about hacking that way, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? The first thing that comes to your mind is, you know, maybe I should understand how this application works before I try and hack it. A lot of people will immediately go into like, oh, I'm going to port scan it, or, oh, I'm going to fuzz it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a vulnerability scan. Just forget about all of that first. Use the application in normal operation, how the developer expected the application to be used, and then throw stimulus at that application that it didn't expect to receive and see how it responds to that. That's really all hacking is to me. So when I'm trying to hack an API, the first thing I want to do, if I want to be able to gain unauthorized access to data or perform functions that I shouldn't be able to, like remotely lock and unlock a door of a car, I'm going to first understand how that API works. And doing a Widem attack on that API and that mobile app will allow me to analyze those requests. Now, for those of you who are like, Alissa, I don't understand. It's encrypted. How is it possible that you can even do that? That's the point of the Widem tool, right? Like Midem Proxy or Burp Suite has also a great interception tool. So, you know, these tools will take care of that for you in an automated way and send certificates in both directions. Oops, sorry. Siri thought I was talking to her. So it basically sends certificates in both directions and allows you to decrypt that traffic. Okay, so here's another screenshot. Some of you will see some Firebase URLs in there, which is basically Google's, a database in Google. You'll see some comments that the developers put into the actual code, hard-coded keys and tokens. Now, a lot of you are probably like, Alissa, how did you do that? Well, there's a great tool called Mobile Security Framework that's freely available that you can download right now, and it allows you to drag and drop iOS apps, Android apps, and reverse engineer them. And what it does is it takes that mobile app and it'll reverse it back to the source code. And so a lot of developers will hard code keys and tokens into the source code, probably not knowing that how easy it is to actually reconstruct it or deconstruct it back to the original source code. So this tool will allow you to find these usernames and passwords. I've found S3 bucket authentication hard-coded as well. So a lot of this sort of modus operandi, if you will, or methodology that I follow when hacking APIs is I will reverse engineer the mobile app. I will see if there's, why brute force logins if the developer hard coded credentials in the mobile app. I had no idea how to take so many keys and really put them into a PowerPoint. So I just took massive screenshots of the keys and tokens in Excel and just put them in the slide. You can see just kind of from my notes here, the financial services company or fintech and the different keys or tokens that have been hard coded in them. It's really startling if you were to actually take a screenshot of this slide and zoom in on it and look at some of the things that are actually hard coded in there. It will shock you. Just things that developers should not be hard coding in the source code. There you can see some production keys in there. The very interesting thing with the with the findings that I went through was a lot of the keys and tokens were for third parties. And so I would go to the third party's website, look at their documentation, and right there in the documentation in big black bold letters with a HTML frame around it, it'll say, for example, one of them said, don't hard code this, this key, this production key into your source code without, obfuscating it or using any sort of source code obfuscation because of how easy it is to reverse it and get access to this key. And the developer hard coded it anyway. So even though the documentation said not to do this, the developers were still doing it. So that's just kind of how shocking some of the stuff was. Now, this is a very interesting finding with one of the banks. I was actually able to change the PIN code of any bank customer and transfer money in and out of accounts. So if you look at these screenshots, you can see as long as I knew the card number, and I could obviously just cycle through all the card numbers because they were sequential. I could actually just take any Visa card, any ATM debit card, and change the PIN code. There was just no authorization whatsoever. It basically just looked to make sure, oh, Alissa has a key. Remember from our analogy, Alissa has a ticket. And that's good. We're good to go. She can request anything she wants. There were no scopes applied to my token that prevented me from performing actions that are not belonging to my bank account. So pretty interesting. So, what I learned from robbing banks, most importantly, is despite it being 2021, developers are really still not authorizing authenticated API requests, and it was systemic. So if you look at a lot of the findings from across the different banks and cryptocurrency exchanges and some of those screenshots, you can see that I'm being authenticated, but my traffic isn't being authorized. Organizations are not maintaining asset catalogs of their APIs. People, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. I don't understand how you can secure something when you don't know you have it. The most important thing that all of you need to understand is the importance of shadow APIs and how devastating it can be to your organization if you don't know they're out there. As I actually was also a CISO before retiring from cybersecurity, and one of the things that I would struggle with was the product team deploying new APIs without me knowing about it because they had that root access to the cloud service provider. They could deploy new APIs all over the place, and the cybersecurity team didn't know. You must use an API threat management solution that catalogs what you've got and creates an asset inventory of your APIs. And one of the most important things that I want to tell you is that a lot of the organizations that I worked with in my research had web application firewalls as a form of protecting their APIs. Please don't do that. Take it from an API hacker. Web application firewalls are great for legacy web servers, for legacy web applications. They are not to be used for securing your APIs. You have to understand that WAFs typically are rules-based languages looking for known signatures or patterns in payloads like SQL injection. They are not going to detect business logic attacks. They are not going to detect things like Alissa is authenticated, but why is she requesting bank account information for another customer? A WAF isn't going to know how to detect something like that. You want to use an API threat management solution. And there are purpose-built API security solutions out there. One of the sponsors, for example, Salt Security, is a great example of a product in that category. There's still no context in security. Organizations, again, are still using WAFs to secure their APIs. So again, just make sure that you're not doing that. Many companies are transferring their risk. Okay, this is probably going to make all of your jaws drop. One of the banks that I hit, I found that they actually outsourced the development of their APIs and their mobile apps to a company whose sole job and their business model is to build APIs for banks, for financial services companies. And their vulnerable code got rinsed and reused across 300 other banks. So I was on a late night phone call in London at the time, talking with the CEO of the company, because the findings that I found in the fact that the requests weren't being authorized, the Bola vulnerabilities had been rinsed and reused in every single one of their customers. So I could then take my findings with that one bank and then go rob 300 other banks and transfer money out of those accounts to my account. So just be really careful when you are transferring your risk to an outside organization. Remember that if your organization is outsourcing, just because they have ISO 27001 or SOC 2 Type 2, it doesn't matter. You need to verify and check that their code is actually secure. Don't rely on their certification. Request a penetration test. Ask for a pen test report. And whoever you're talking to, make sure that when they're bringing a pen testing agency or firm to do that, make sure that they have API experience in hacking APIs. I can throw a rock and hit a senior pen tester, but it doesn't necessarily mean that senior pen tester knows how to hack APIs. So make sure that you see those reports, make sure you request an API pen test, and make sure you're doing pen testing. Make sure you're hacking your own code or hacking the code of companies that you outsource to. Hack the mobile app, hack the API, because guess what? It's not their logo that's going to be in the news if you're breached because of their insecure code. It's your logo. So there's only so much risk that you can transfer. And that's it. All of you survived my keynote presentation. This is my QR code. If you scan it, it will actually add me to your contact list on your phone, and it will give you my cell phone number. So if you want to stalk me, it'll give you all my social media accounts as well. So definitely reach out to me. I want to thank all of you for attending the summit and being here for my keynote. And I wish all of you an awesome day and an awesome rest of the event. So I think we're going to do Q&A. Looks like we've got some compliments. Thank you so much, Matt, Ed. Thanks for joining us, Greg. Yeah, definitely SaaS pen testing, so important. Like I said, you're really not advocating that risk. You just want to make sure that if you're going to outsource to a company, that you're hacking the code that they give you. You really just don't want to trust that they're hardening it just because they have certification. I always like to say, actually, I need to give credit to my wife on this one. The difference between certification and security is that, certification or compliance, I should say, compliance will keep you out of the hot seat with regulators, and security will keep you out of the news. So there's definitely a huge difference between compliance and security. So just because they have compliance certifications, whether it's ISO or SOC 2, you want to make sure that the code they're giving you is secure and it's hardened. Just trying to look for some more questions in the comments. So Greg says, speaking as a developer, the problem is occasionally lazy or ignorant developers, but far more often it's because developers aren't given the time or requirements to actually do things right, which takes time and money, and are backed into a situation where fast and cheap is the right solution. Greg, I agree with you. Okay, so I really want to make this clear because I know there's probably developers in the audience, and the relationship historically between developers and security isn't the best. It's polarized. I get it, but I don't want any of you to get me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. I have an enormous amount of respect for developers. And here's the thing. A lot of the times, and I will tell you, there isn't a single developer, Greg, that I have ever met that wanted to write insecure code. Someone point out or tell me a developer who wants to write insecure code. I can't find one, and I've been doing this for 23 years. There's no such thing. Every developer wants to write secure code. The problem is that those timelines, and I agree with you, Greg, and that is not on the fault of developers. That's on the fault of the organization. Okay, here's the other thing. All right, let's point the pink elephant out in the room. We have these organizations who are, and I promise I'll get off my soapbox here, but we have these organizations who are required under compliance, whether it's PCI or ISO, whatever, to send all of their employees to security awareness training, right? Every company today is required to do security awareness training for their employees, all the way down to the receptionist, okay? All right, fine, great, awesome. What about the developers? For the organizations that are doing security awareness training, do you know how many banks and financial services and fintech companies were writing their own code, hired developers writing their own code, and were not sending their developers to secure code training? They're doing security awareness training, but if you're writing code, if you have developers, why aren't you sending them to secure code training? Developers want training, developers want to write secure code, but the problem is, as Greg mentioned, is those timelines, and usually those timelines are designed around just quickly delivering code, and not taking time out, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, to do a penetration test. Also, I'm a huge believer in shift left security. Let's not wait to move until the code moves into production and deployment to begin security testing. Let's give the developers tools that will identify insecure coding at that time that the code is being written, right? So, have something that sort of yells at the developer and tells them, hey, what you're doing is insecure, don't do that. Why don't you try writing this instead? And try and eliminate a lot of those vulnerabilities while the code is being written. Matt says also build awareness and desire for them to want to follow the rules and guidance. Yep, train, govern your developers. That's true. Jacob, thanks for backing me up on that. Awesome. Yeah, I don't see any more questions. Scott says, dang, I'd heard of Alissa, but wasn't aware of what just massive rock. Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, definitely, it's weird. It's, I've definitely gotten to a point in cybersecurity where, I was ready to move on and move into film and TV production. So for those of you who have heard of me, but not known what I'm doing now, we're at Knight Studios. We're producing now our 8th franchise, our 8th TV series, and we create TV series around cybersecurity. So hacker genre stuff. If you're interested, go check out knighttvplus.com, which is our new TV network we launched for cybersecurity content and crypto content. But yeah, been doing cybersecurity for about 23 years, and just got to a point where I was ready to move on, and I didn't really feel like after 23 years, it was something that I wanted to continue to do anymore. So now I'm a writer, director in Hollywood. And so, yeah, so cool. Lonnie asks, are there stories of some successful remediations you've seen organizations do with the findings, results you brought them? That's a great question, Lonnie. So I did have an opportunity to sit down with some of the developers and with some of my findings and try and understand why they were doing the things they were doing. I actually ran into one developer who had no idea I could actually extract the Android app off of my device and then reverse engineer it. Didn't understand how I was able to peruse the directory structure of the app and find a directory. I kid you not, Lonnie. Are you ready for this? I found a directory of already pre-computed, unencrypted private keys within the directory of the mobile app. Unbelievable. But there's just developers out there that don't know that how easy it is to extract a mobile app off of a device. For those of you who don't know, there's a great tool in the Android App Store called APK Extractor. And what you can do is it'll allow you to extract the Android app off of the Android device and upload it to like your Google Drive. And then you can download it to your workstation and then pop it into MobSF and reverse it. So the Google Play Store itself has tools that allow you to do this. Oh, sorry, there's some questions in the Q&A tab. I see that. I don't see a Q&A tab. I just see private chat and comments. Where's the Q&A tab? Yeah, throw your questions in the comments. I think you guys are stuck with me for a few more minutes here. Let's see. Greg says secure coding isn't instinctive and developers must be trained in it. I agree with you, Greg. I mean, like I said, I can't believe that organizations are hiring developers and not giving them a training budget to be able to actually give them secure code training. It's so important to do that. Caitlin says, love the presentation. The Lambo Valet analogy will stay with me forever. Yes! Thank you, Caitlin. Wasn't it great? Like, I just, and it's funny because the ticket that the valet gives you is like your OAuth token, right? It's your token, but a lot of the apps that I had looked at, a lot of the APIs I'd looked at had no scopes implemented. So you could take that token and request data or perform actions that didn't belong to your account. Let's see. Ben asks, what are your thoughts on ChatGPT and how will it impact cybersecurity and possibly help hackers? Wow, that's a really good question. So ChatGPT is interesting. Artificial intelligence in general is interesting. Because if you think about it, back in the 90s when I started, when it was all about defacing websites and it wasn't about profiting off the data that you stole or anything like that, things were very different back then. And now, there was a time where, we were looking at the cybersecurity solutions that were coming out on the RSA floor or Black Hat or DEF CON, and you would look at the vendor booth and like they'd be touting machine learning and artificial intelligence, and only to find out that there was a huge text file of signatures or something like that. But artificial intelligence and ML is a thing now. It's a real thing, and it is actually helping to make our ability to lower the mean time to detection and mean time to response, or MTTD and MTTR, in being able to not prevent attacks in the first place, but actually detect the adversary quicker. And I think that we, in general, need to get to a point where, and I promise I'll bring it back to your question, but I think we need to get to a point where, and some of you may want to key my car for saying this, but I don't believe in prevention. I believe that we need to assume that the network or the system or the person will be compromised, and we need to focus on being able to lower that MTTD and MTTR, knowing that the adversary will come and that the adversary will become successful eventually, and we need to find a way to be able to detect them just more quickly. But as far as ChatGPT is concerned, I think it's changing a lot of things. And I think we need to adapt to AI and realize. Now, I do want to say this, Chelsea. I don't believe that ChatGPT or artificial intelligence in general will replace humans in cybersecurity, because I really believe that there's something fundamental to being human and having that analytic rigor that I think AI is very far from being able to achieve. And that analytic rigor and being able to say this plus this plus this is equals to something bad is, yes, correlation, but you still have the ability to generate false positives. I think false positives will be with us for quite a while. I think it's amazing what artificial intelligence is doing, and I hope in our lifetime we can continue to see those advancements and see some of these, or even possibly prevent breaches in the future. But I don't think that humans will ever be removed from the loop. Dave asks, are there any low-hanging fruit you'd recommend for organizations to start with first, given how daunting the API and code landscape is today? Great question, Dave. Yeah, I think when it comes to APIs, the low-hanging fruit is just making sure that you've nailed down your authorization vulnerabilities. All too often, I feel like a lot of the findings, whether it's in healthcare, for those of you who've not downloaded it, please go do so. Go check out 2 reports I wrote. One is called Playing with Fire, and that's FHIR. Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. It's a report I published that actually ended up being picked up by the Office of the Inspector General and Health and Human Services, and changing public policy when it comes to healthcare data. So the Office of National Coordinator, the ONC, and Health and Human Services passed a law, passed rules that state that healthcare providers and payers must make our healthcare data available via APIs through what are called FHIR APIs. And I, as a hacker, I was like, oh, that's amazing. Let me check this out. Sure, there's no vulnerabilities there. And I spent about a year hacking FHIR APIs and was able to access millions of patient records through these APIs, through these unhardened APIs. And so, I think one of the most common, most systemic issue I see across healthcare, financial services, fintech, transportation is developers are authenticating API requests, but they're not authorizing it. All of you, please understand there's a huge difference between authorization and authentication. Auth-C and Auth-N, they are two different things. Authenticate your requests, yes. I'm not saying not to authenticate, but authenticate your requests, but also authorize them. And there were some APIs where they were issuing tokens and the token was expired, but it was still accepting it as a legitimate token. So, respect those time to lives on those tokens and making sure that you're expiring them out. But I would say probably the answer to your question, Dave, is, just getting authorization right, because there's so many APIs across so many different sectors in my research. The FHIR report, for those of you who are interested, also there's an mHealth report that I published called All That We Let In. And these are free reports. You can go Google them, Google my name along with the name of the report. Also, I released a report called Scorched Earth as well that you can check out. And that was how I hacked 55 banks in less than a week. So a lot of this information and how I did it is in that report. That's a great report. You can download as well if you want to continue following my research. Chelsea asked, Alissa, you talked about the risk and some tools for folks to secure APIs. Can you chat a little bit about what you see as action items right now for anyone using APIs to up their security game? Good question, Chelsea. So I would say that first and foremost, a common question I get on social media is, can we just, point Nessus or, fill in your vulnerability scanner name here at an API and find vulnerabilities? APIs are very different than that. You can't just kind of do a pen test against it like you would a regular web server. Yes, APIs speak the HTTP protocol, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you do a pen test against it like you would an IIS or an Apache web server. You want to make sure you use API tool specific stuff. I don't know if you were here for that part of the presentation, Chelsea, but go check out a mind map by a guy named David Sopas. And what he did was he broke out all the different phases of an API penetration test and then broke out all the different tools for those phases of the test. And you do also have different APIs, everyone. Not all APIs are RESTful APIs. You also have GraphQL APIs. So there's different tools depending on the kind of API you're doing a test against that you can download and use. I know we only have about a minute left here, I believe. So, but these were all great questions. I want to thank all of you for the questions and for the comments, and thank you for the warm approbation. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining me in my keynote today. Again, if you have any other questions, or if I didn't see your question or comment, please definitely reach out to me on social media. And I'll see all of you in the funny pages.